My sister kept telling her new boyfriends my apartment was hers. One day, she screamed, "Why can't you just play along?" after I exposed her lies again. So I said, build your own life instead of stealing mine. I bought my apartment 3 years ago in downtown Chicago. It's nothing extravagant, but it's a nice 2-bedroom place with modern finishes, a great view of the city, and in a building with good amenities. I worked hard to afford it, saved for years for the down payment, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Rebecca, my sister, on the other hand, has always struggled with stability. She's jumped between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a year, and currently works part-time at a boutique while building her influencer brand. She lives in a studio apartment on the other side of town that she shares with a roommate. We've always been close despite our different life paths, and I've tried to be supportive without enabling her poor financial decisions. About 4 months ago, Rebecca asked if she could borrow my spare key because she needed to pick up a package I was having delivered while I was at work. I didn't think twice about it. She's my sister after all. She grabbed the package, texted me that she got it, and that was that. Or so I thought. The first incident happened about 6 weeks ago. I was working from home on a Friday when my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was a man I'd never seen before dressed like he was going on a date. Nice button-down cologne that hit me from 3 feet away holding a bottle of wine. "Oh," he said, looking confused. "Is Rebecca here?" She told me to meet her at her place. I explained that Rebecca didn't live here, that this was my apartment. The guy looked even more confused, showed me his phone with texts from my sister giving him my address and apartment number, telling him to come up around 7 p.m. for dinner at her place. I called Rebecca immediately. She laughed it off, saying she'd been running late and asked him to meet her there because it was closer to the restaurant they were going to. She said she'd mentioned it was her brother's place, but he must have misunderstood. I let it go, though something felt off about her explanation. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, I was coming home from the gym on a Saturday morning when I found another stranger trying to use a key on my door. When I asked what he was doing, he said Rebecca had given him a spare key to their place because she was in the shower and told him to let himself in. I was stunned. Not only had Rebecca made a copy of my key without telling me, but she was also giving it to random men she was dating. When I confronted the guy showing him my ID with the apartment address, he was mortified. He told me they'd been dating for 2 weeks, and Rebecca had been telling him all about her amazing apartment and how she'd love to cook dinner for him there. This time when I called Rebecca, I was furious. She tried to play it off again, saying she'd only given him the key because she was running behind and didn't want him waiting in the hallway. When I demanded she return my spare key and any copy she'd made, she got defensive. "God, James, why are you being so uptight?" she said. "It's not like I'm throwing parties there. I just needed to borrow your place a couple of times. You're hardly ever home anyway." That's when the full truth came out. Rebecca admitted she'd been telling dates she lived in my apartment because she was embarrassed by her current living situation. She said it was just a little white lie to make a good first impression, and that once guys got to know her, they wouldn't care where she lived. I was beyond angry. I told her this was a massive violation of my privacy and trust. I demanded all keys back immediately and told her she was no longer welcome in my apartment unless I was there. She called me selfish, said I was jealous of her dating life, and hung up on me. I changed my locks that same day thinking that would be the end of it. But over the past month, I've had 3 more men show up at my door at various times, all looking for Rebecca. Each one had a similar story. They'd been dating her for a few weeks. She told them about her beautiful apartment and had either given them the address or told them to meet her there. The most recent incident was yesterday, and it's why I'm writing this post. A man showed up with a suitcase and 2 boxes. When I opened the door, he smiled and said, "Hey, you must be Rebecca's roommate. I'm Tyler. She said I could start moving some stuff in today." I was speechless. This stranger thought he was moving into my apartment because my sister had apparently told him they were taking the next step in their relationship and he could move in with her. When I explained the situation, Tyler didn't believe me at first. He showed me weeks of texts where Rebecca talked about our apartment and how excited she was for him to move in. The poor guy was devastated when I showed him the lease with only my name on it, my male photos of me in the apartment over the years. He'd given up his previous living arrangement because Rebecca had convinced him they were moving in together. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer. He left looking completely crushed, dragging his suitcase behind him. I've tried calling and texting Rebecca all day, but she's not responding. Our mother says Rebecca told her I was being controlling and jealous and trying to sabotage her happiness. Several family members have reached out saying Rebecca is upset that I'm not supporting her and that I should be more understanding of her situation. I'm at a loss. I love my sister, but this has gone way too far. She's not just lying to these men. She's potentially putting my safety at risk by giving out my address to strangers and telling them they can access my home. Plus, now she's ruining these guys' lives with her lies. Tyler had to scramble to find a place to stay because he'd already given notice at his previous apartment. Am I overreacting here? How do I handle this situation when she won't even talk to me and has turned family members against me? I'm considering sending a cease and desist letter, but that feels like a nuclear option with my own sister. Has anyone dealt with anything similar? Update 1. 1 week later. First, thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. Your comments helped me realize I wasn't crazy and that this situation was as serious as I thought. I especially appreciated those who pointed out the safety and legal liability issues I hadn't fully considered. A lot has happened since my last post, and unfortunately, the situation has escalated rather than improved. After Rebecca continued to ignore my calls and texts, I decided to reach out to our mother directly to explain my side of the story. I even showed her screenshots of the texts Tyler had shared with me, where Rebecca clearly implied the apartment was hers. My mother was shocked and admitted Rebecca's version of events had been very different. She'd been told I was jealous of Rebecca's success with dating and was trying to embarrass her in front of her boyfriend. My mother agreed to mediate a conversation between us. We met at our parents' house 3 days after my original post. I thought we'd have a mature discussion about boundaries and respect. Instead, Rebecca came in guns blazing, accusing me of trying to ruin her life. Her defense was mind-blowing. She claimed that dating in Chicago was impossible with her living situation, and that she was just borrowing my apartment's address to level the playing field. She said all the successful women she knew had nice places, and it wasn't fair that she had to compete while living in a dump. Her words, not mine. When I brought up Tyler and how he'd tried to move in, she actually laughed. She said it wasn't her fault he'd misunderstood and moved too fast. She claimed she was going to tell him the truth eventually, but he'd jumped the gun. When I asked when exactly she planned to tell these men the truth, she couldn't give me a straight answer. The conversation devolved from there. Rebecca accused me of being privileged, selfish, and not understanding how hard it was to date as a woman in her 30s. She said I had everything handed to me. Absolutely not true. I worked 2 jobs through college and lived on ramen for years to save for my apartment, and that the least I could do was help her out. I tried to stay calm and explained again that she was violating my privacy, putting me at risk, and deceiving innocent people. Her response: "It's not like I'm hurting anyone. These guys get to date me, don't they? That should be enough." My mother, to her credit, was appalled by Rebecca's attitude and took my side. This made Rebecca even angrier. She stormed out, but not before saying, "Fine, I won't use your precious apartment anymore. But when I'm alone forever because I can't compete with other women, that's on you." I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a call from my building's management. They wanted to know why I'd been having so many guests recently and reminded me that subletting wasn't allowed without permission. Apparently, one of the men Rebecca had given my address to had been buzzing random apartments when I didn't answer, telling people he was supposed to be staying with his girlfriend who lived there. Another had argued with the doorman, insisting he was on the guest list for my apartment. I had to go to the management office and explain the entire embarrassing situation. They were understanding, but warned me that any further incidents could be grounds for lease violation. I also had to provide them with a photo of Rebecca to share with building security, instructing them that she was not to be allowed entry under any circumstances. But the worst part came yesterday. I received a Facebook message from a woman named Sarah who said she was Tyler's sister. She explained that Tyler had been devastated by the situation and wanted to warn me that he'd since discovered Rebecca had done this before. Through a mutual friend, he'd learned that Rebecca had pulled similar stunts with other guys using friends' apartments or even Hems to pretend she lived somewhere nicer. Sarah also told me that Tyler was considering small claims court against Rebecca for the costs he'd incurred breaking his lease early and having to find emergency housing. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide a statement about what happened. I agreed, though I'm not sure if Tyler will actually go through with it. I've also discovered that Rebecca has been telling a very different story on social media. She posted a vague story about toxic family members trying to sabotage her happiness and how she's cutting out negativity from her life. Several of her friends have been commenting support, clearly not knowing the real story. The family is now divided. Some relatives think I should have just let Rebecca use the apartment occasionally to help her out. Others are appalled by her behavior. My dad, who had been traveling for work during the initial drama, is firmly on my side and has told Rebecca she needs to grow up and take responsibility for her life. I've decided to send a formal cease and desist letter after all. My lawyer friend helped me draft it, making it clear that any further attempts to use my address or represent my apartment as hers will result in legal action. I've also installed a Ring doorbell to document any future incidents. I still can't believe it's come to this. Part of me feels guilty. Rebecca is clearly struggling with some deeper issues around self-worth and image, but I can't enable this behavior anymore, especially when it's affecting innocent people like Tyler. I'll update again if anything significant happens, though. I'm hoping the cease and desist letter will be the end of it. Update 2, 3 weeks later. I really hoped I wouldn't need to write another update, but the situation with Rebecca has taken an even stranger turn. After I sent the cease and desist letter, Rebecca went radio silent for about 2 weeks. No social media posts, no contact with family members, nothing. I started to think maybe the legal threat had finally gotten through to her. My parents said she wasn't returning their calls either, but my mom had seen her car at her apartment, so we knew she was okay. Then last Monday, I got a call from my building's front desk at 10 p.m. Security had detained a man who was insisting he lived in my apartment and becoming aggressive when they wouldn't let him up. They'd called the police, and the officers wanted to speak with me. I went down to the lobby to find absolute chaos. A man I'd never seen before, probably mid-30s, well-dressed, was in handcuffs, yelling about his rights and demanding to be let into his home. Two police officers were trying to calm him down, while my building security looked stressed. When the man saw me, he started yelling even louder. "That's the guy. That's the scammer who's been squatting in my girlfriend's apartment. Arrest him." It took nearly an hour to sort out what had happened. The man, Christopher, had been dating Rebecca for about a month. But here's where it gets truly insane. Rebecca had told him that I was her ex-boyfriend who refused to move out of her apartment after our breakup. She'd spun an elaborate tale about how she'd bought the apartment, but I'd manipulated her into putting it in my name for tax reasons. And now I was squatting there and refusing to leave. Christopher fully believed he was coming to confront a terrible ex-boyfriend who was taking advantage of his new girlfriend. He'd even offered to hire a lawyer to help Rebecca evict me. When security wouldn't let him up, he thought they were in on it with me. I had to show the police my lease, my mortgage documents, bank statements showing my payments, everything. Christopher slowly realized he'd been completely duped. The anger drained from his face, replaced by embarrassment and confusion. The police uncuffed him and he apologized profusely to everyone. Before he left, Christopher shared more disturbing details. Rebecca had been staying at his place for the past 2 weeks, claiming she couldn't go home because I was there. She'd been getting him increasingly worked up about the situation, saying I was dangerous and she was scared. She'd even shown him fake text conversations. I have no idea how she created these, where I was threatening her and refusing to leave her apartment. The poor guy had genuinely thought he was protecting his girlfriend from an abusive ex. He'd come to the building that night because Rebecca had texted him in tears, saying she tried to get into her apartment, but I changed the locks again. I gave Christopher my contact information and suggested he might want to verify anything else Rebecca had told him. He left looking like his world had been turned upside down. The next morning, I got a call from Rebecca. She was furious that I'd humiliated her boyfriend and ruined her relationship. When I pointed out that she'd literally tried to have me arrested and evicted from my own home, she tried to gaslight me, saying I was exaggerating and that she'd never said those things to Christopher. I recorded the call legal in my state and told her I was documenting everything for potential legal action. She hung up on me, but the story doesn't end there. Christopher reached out to me 2 days later. After our encounter, he'd done some digging. He discovered Rebecca had been lying about everything. Her job, she told him, she was a marketing director. Her education claimed to have an MBA. Even her age. She'd said she was 27. He'd also found out she'd been dating at least 2 other men during their exclusive relationship, telling each of them different stories about her living situation. Christopher has joined Tyler in considering legal action. Apparently, Rebecca had borrowed several thousand from Christopher for legal fees to fight me for the apartment. He's trying to get the money back, but Rebecca has blocked him everywhere. The worst part, I've now learned from other family members that Rebecca has been telling extended family and family friends that I'm trying to steal her apartment. My cousin called me yesterday saying she'd heard I was having financial troubles and trying to take advantage of Rebecca. I've had to send out a mass email with documentation to set the record straight. My parents are devastated. They've tried to get Rebecca into therapy, but she refuses to admit she's done anything wrong. My dad has cut off the small financial support he was still providing her, hoping it will force her to face reality. I've had to hire an actual lawyer now, not just for the cease and desist, but for potential defamation issues. The lawyer says I have a strong case if I want to pursue it, but I'm torn. She's still my sister despite everything. I've also been in touch with Tyler and Christopher, and we've discovered there are at least 3 other men with similar stories. We're creating a shared document of evidence in case any of them decide to pursue legal action. I never imagined it would escalate to this level. What started as my sister being embarrassed about her apartment has turned into what seems like pathological lying and fraud. I still love her, but I don't know how to help someone who won't admit they have a problem. Final update 2 months later. I debated whether to write this final update, but I feel like I owe it to everyone who's followed this bizarre saga. This will be my last post about the situation. A lot has happened in the past 2 months. And while I wish I could say everything worked out perfectly, real life is rarely that neat. First, the legal situation. Christopher did end up filing a small claims court case against Rebecca for the money she'd borrowed under false pretenses. Tyler decided not to pursue legal action, saying he just wanted to move on with his life. 2 other men who'd been deceived by Rebecca also came forward. One had lent her money for supposed medical bills. Another had paid for a vacation she claimed was to visit her sick mother, but was actually a trip with a different boyfriend. The small claims case was a wake-up call for everyone. Rebecca showed up to court still trying to maintain her lies. But when presented with documented evidence, including text messages and bank transfers, she broke down. The judge ruled in Christopher's favor, ordering Rebecca to repay the $3,000 she borrowed, plus court costs. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. After the court hearing, Rebecca finally admitted she needed help. It wasn't a sudden revelation or a dramatic moment. She just looked exhausted and quietly asked our parents if they would help her find a therapist. It turns out Rebecca had been struggling with severe anxiety and depression for years, combined with what her therapist later identified as compulsive lying that had spiraled out of control. She'd created an entire fantasy life on social media and in her dating profiles, and the lies had become so elaborate she couldn't keep track of them anymore. The apartment situation was just the most visible manifestation of a much deeper problem. I want to be clear, mental health issues don't excuse what she did. The men she deceived were real people with real feelings who suffered real consequences. But understanding the root cause has helped our family figure out how to move forward. Rebecca has been in intensive therapy for the past 6 weeks. She's had to come clean to all the men she was dating, which was humiliating but necessary. She's also had to delete all her dating apps and social media accounts as part of her treatment plan. She's living with our parents temporarily while she gets back on her feet financially and emotionally. The therapy revealed that Rebecca's issues stemmed partly from comparing herself constantly to others, including me, and feeling like she was failing at life. The lies started small, exaggerating her job title, fudging her age, but grew into an alternate reality she felt trapped in. The therapist explained that each lie required more lies to maintain, creating an exhausting cycle that was actually a relief for Rebecca to finally break. As for our relationship, it's complicated. I've attended a few family therapy sessions to work through my anger and rebuild trust. I'm not ready to have her back in my life fully, and she understands that. She's written me a long letter apologizing for everything, acknowledging the violation of trust and the danger she put me in. It felt sincere, but I know rebuilding our relationship will take time, if it's even possible. The building management was understanding once I explained the situation had been resolved. There have been no more incidents, and my reputation with them has been restored. I did keep the Ring doorbell, though. It gives me peace of mind. Some positive things have come from this mess. Tyler reached out to thank me for handling things professionally and mentioned he's now much more careful about verifying information when dating. Christopher and I actually grabbed coffee last week. Weird as that sounds, we bonded over the shared bizarre experience. He's doing well and said the situation taught him to trust his instincts when something seems off. My parents have been amazing through all of this. They've supported both Rebecca and me while maintaining appropriate boundaries. They've also started attending a support group for families dealing with loved ones who struggle with compulsive lying. Yes, that's apparently common enough to have support groups. Rebecca has been making amends where possible. She's on a payment plan to repay Christopher and the other men she borrowed money from. She's taken a full-time job at a call center, not glamorous but stable, and is slowly rebuilding her life with honesty this time. Her therapist says she's making progress, though it will be a long journey. As for me, I've learned a lot from this experience. I've become more aware of how my success might have inadvertently contributed to Rebecca's feelings of inadequacy. Not that I'm responsible for her actions, but I could have been more sensitive to her struggles. I've also learned the importance of boundaries, even with family, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. I still have moments of anger when I think about everything that happened. The stress, the embarrassment, the potential danger she put me in. It's not something I can just forget, but I'm working on forgiveness, not for her sake, but for mine. To anyone dealing with a similar situation, document everything, set firm boundaries, and don't feel guilty for protecting yourself. But also remember that people who lie compulsively are often dealing with deeper issues. That doesn't mean you have to tolerate the behavior, but it might help you understand it. This will be my last update. Rebecca has a long road ahead of her, and I have my own life to focus on. We may never have the close sibling relationship we once did, but I'm hopeful we can eventually build something new, something based on honesty and mutual respect. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support throughout this journey. Your comments helped me feel less alone in dealing with an absolutely surreal situation. I hope none of you ever have to deal with anything similar, but if you do know that you're not crazy and you're not overreacting by protecting yourself and demanding honesty from the people in your life, take care, everyone. 1 year after my last update, I never expected to log back into this account again, but something happened recently that made me realize this story deserved one final chapter. Not because there was another dramatic confrontation, another stranger at my door, or another unbelievable lie. This time, it was because life had finally become ordinary again, and after everything my family went through, ordinary felt like a miracle. My apartment is still my home. The Ring camera is still mounted beside the front door, though these days it mostly records delivery drivers' neighbors walking their dogs and the occasional raccoon wandering through the parking garage at night. Every now and then, I catch myself checking the notifications with the same knot in my stomach I used to get expecting another confused boyfriend carrying flowers or luggage. It never happens anymore. That constant feeling of waiting for the next disaster has slowly faded, and I didn't realize how exhausted I'd been until it disappeared. Rebecca has stayed in therapy consistently. According to my parents, she hasn't missed a session in almost a year. More importantly, she's stopped trying to convince everyone that she's someone she isn't. She still struggles with insecurity, and there are difficult days when she compares herself to everyone around her, but instead of building another fantasy life, she actually talks about it. That alone feels like a bigger victory than I ever thought possible. She's still working at the same call center. It's not glamorous, and she jokes that no influencer would ever post about spending 8 hours answering customer complaints, but she's proud that every paycheck is honestly earned. She finished paying Christopher back a few months ago and recently made the final payment to another man she'd borrowed money from during the worst period of her compulsive lying. None of them became friends with her again, and honestly, I don't think they should have. Forgiveness doesn't always mean rebuilding a relationship, and she's finally learned to accept that actions have permanent consequences. Our relationship has changed in ways that are difficult to explain. We aren't as close as we were growing up, and maybe we never will be again. Trust doesn't magically return because someone apologizes. It returns through hundreds of small choices made consistently over time. Rebecca knows that now. She no longer asks me for favors that blur boundaries. She never jokes about borrowing my apartment or my belongings. Before visiting, she texts first. If I say no, she accepts it without guilt or manipulation. They sound like simple things, but after everything that happened, they're signs of real growth. Last Thanksgiving was the first holiday we spent together without tension hanging over every conversation. Nobody pretended the past never happened. Instead, we simply acknowledged that we'd survived it. At one point, Rebecca quietly pulled me aside while everyone else was cleaning the dishes. She looked around the kitchen, smiled awkwardly, and said, "You know, this is the first family dinner in years where I didn't feel like I had to impress anyone." I didn't really know what to say, so I just nodded. Somehow that was enough. My parents look lighter these days too. They spent years worrying about Rebecca without understanding what was really happening, then months trying to hold our family together while everything exploded. Now they spend more time talking about vacations, gardening, and retirement than crisis management. They still attend their support group occasionally, not because they're in constant crisis anymore, but because they like helping families who are just beginning journeys similar to ours. Apparently hearing, "It can get better even if it takes time," means a lot when you're living through the worst of it. As for Tyler and Christopher, life moved on for them too. Tyler got engaged earlier this year. Believe it or not, he actually sent me a wedding invitation. I couldn't attend because of a work trip, but I mailed him a gift and a note wishing him happiness. He later messaged me saying our bizarre experience had taught him never to ignore red flags just because he wanted something to be true. Christopher eventually laughed about everything. We still meet for coffee every few months, mostly to complain about work and argue over baseball. It's strange how one of the worst experiences of my life accidentally introduced me to someone who became a genuine friend. Sometimes life has an odd sense of humor. The biggest lesson I carried away from all this wasn't really about compulsive lying or dating or family drama. It was about boundaries. Before all this happened, I believed loving someone meant constantly making exceptions for them. I confused kindness with unlimited access. I thought saying no made me selfish. Now I understand that healthy boundaries don't destroy relationships. They reveal whether a relationship is healthy in the first place. If someone can only love you while benefiting from your lack of boundaries, they aren't really respecting you. That realization has improved every relationship in my life, not just the one with my sister. I also stopped feeling responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. Supporting someone and rescuing someone aren't the same thing. Rebecca only began changing after everyone around her stopped protecting her from the consequences of her choices. That was painful for all of us, but it was also necessary. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is allow reality to do the teaching. A few weeks ago, I finally replaced the spare key to my apartment. For nearly 2 years, I'd refused to give one to anyone. I didn't even realize how symbolic that had become until I stood in the hardware store holding the new copy. This time, I gave it to my parents for emergencies. Rebecca was there when I handed it over. She smiled, looked at the key for a second, then laughed softly and said, "Probably best if that stays with Mom." We all laughed, including me. It was the first time the apartment had ever been the subject of a joke that didn't make my stomach tighten. That tiny moment meant more than I can explain. Looking back now, I don't think this story was ever really about an apartment. It was about identity, insecurity, trust, and what happens when someone believes they have to become a different person to deserve love. It nearly destroyed my family, but in the end, honesty did what deception never could. It gave us a chance to rebuild slowly and imperfectly on solid ground. If someone reading this is dealing with a loved one who refuses to face reality, I hope you remember this. You can care about someone deeply without sacrificing your own peace, safety, or dignity. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. Sometimes it's the first step that gives another person the opportunity to finally change. My apartment is still just a 2-bedroom place with a nice view of the city. Nothing extravagant. But today, when I unlock the front door after work, I know exactly what it represents. Not status, not success, just a home built on honesty, and after everything that happened, I honestly can't think of anything more valuable.